All right, who's ready to get pissed off with me? Let's all get pissed off together. So in Politico, Fed's Powell cites top barrier to taming inflation. Workers' wages. Workers' wages. We have a long way to go in restoring price stability, the central bank chief warns. So the head of the Fed is still parroting this notion. The problem is workers' wages. We've gone over this a million times, but the real culprit for inflation, it's the supply chain, which is still fucked up because of the pandemic. And by the way, it's about to be even more fucked up because of stuff going on in China, right? So you have the pandemic and you have corporate profits brought about by effective monopolies. So that's the main culprit. The idea that it's workers' wages or that it's the little bit of help that people got in the middle of the pandemic when they desperately needed it, when they got a $1,400 check or whatever, the idea that that's leading to inflation today is beyond absurd. But this guy has all the power in the world and he's blaming workers' wages, which means what? He's trying to lower their wages. He's trying to induce a recession by raising interest rates, and they want to regain price stability by pushing millions more people into poverty through unemployment. This stuff is crazy. So I'll just give you a little bit of this article here. They say, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell on Wednesday said the biggest remaining barrier to taming inflation is the shortage of workers, which is giving Americans greater clout to seek higher pay. Powell also, again, by the way, isn't that be a good thing? Isn't it a good thing when workers have some more power? They have bargaining power. They can get higher wages. He doesn't think so. Powell also again signaled the Fed will begin raising interest rates in smaller increments, but underscored that significantly higher borrowing costs still lie ahead. In a closely watched speech at the Brookings Institute, the Fed chair said rising costs for services from healthcare to haircuts might be the most important category for understanding the future evolution of prices, and that wages are the largest cost within that category. To be clear, strong wage growth is a good thing. Really, then why are you trying to crush it? He said. But for wage growth to be sustainable, it needs to be consistent with 2% inflation. That will require reducing demand for labor by slowing the economy, he said. Powell's remarks come amid mounting criticism from progressive lawmakers and labor advocates that the central bank's move to crank up rates to kill inflation are unfairly punishing workers and raising the chances of a recession. They're exactly right. That's exactly what it's doing. He cited progress on multiple important fronts, including lower inflation on goods, a trend bolstered by improvements in supply chains. He also said data on new leases suggests that rents, a key component of inflation and a lagging one because they're only renewed about once a year, might begin to bring down the consumer price index later in 2023. Still, quote, it will take substantially more evidence to give comfort that inflation is actually declining, he added. See, on that, look, they've already increased interest rates a lot. I think there's going to be a lagging impact of that. So to continue to jack up interest rates willy-nilly is going to lead to more problems. But that's what he's doing. Now, my fear is, if you jack up the interest rates, and, you know, your theory is that we need higher unemployment in order to get, to reduce inflation. What if the thing that's leading to inflation is not indeed, workers' wages, right? Well, then, what you're doing is creating the perfect environment for stagflation. So you have a recession and you have inflation because you haven't gotten to the core of what the problem is, which again is the supply chain and corporate profits, which leads me to my next piece here. This is in the Hill. Corporate profits hit record high in third quarter amid 40-year high inflation. Wow. Interesting. Almost like that may be one of the main problems, if not the main problem. Nah, it's got to be the workers. Corporate profits in the non-financial sector hit a record high of $2.08 trillion in the third quarter, even as 40-year high inflation continues to squeeze American consumers. Profits adjusted for inventories and capital consumption rose $6.1 billion from the second to third fiscal quarters, the Commerce Department reported Wednesday, continuing a red-hot recovery from the flash recession caused by pandemic shutdowns. Following a two-quarter dip in 2020, quarterly profits have surged by more than 80% over the last 2 years, from around $1.2 trillion to more than $2 trillion, adding weight to arguments that the private sector is driving inflation by exploiting consumer expectations to keep prices elevated. In other words, corporations are taking advantage of the theory of the hysteria around inflation. You got the media going, oh my, inflation. And then these companies go, well, everybody's expecting the prices to go up, so why don't I raise them? Even if they're not actually impacted by the supply chain, You have prices being raised, and then they're going, what? No, it's not. It's not us. It's not that we're just squeezing more profit out of you. It's that inflation is just happening right now. It's a natural law of the economy. What? It's not us. No, it is you. And we've covered specific articles that talk about specific corporations that have done exactly this. Business Insider had a list of these corporations that were like, they're jacking up prices even though they don't have to, and they're doing it just to exploit the current environment and the hysteria around inflation. So, look, this is crazy, man. This is crazy. We're going towards stagflation. We're heading towards a recession while maybe continuing to have inflation at the same time. And look, this is something I rarely agree with Elon Musk. This is one where him and I agree. Stop jacking up the interest rates. Let it be, and let's see what happens within the coming 6 months or so. Let's see what happens, because you can keep going up and up and up, and it could be that we have a delayed reaction, and when everything goes south, it's going to go very south. And like I said, you'll continue to have inflation, but with a recession on top of it, which is a horrendous scenario. Okay, so now let me show you this video from Robert Reich. He's talking about this exact issue, the issue of it's not workers' wages, stupid, it's corporate profits.
Get ready, folks. The war on inflation is about to get ugly. The Federal Reserve is hell-bent on continuing to raise interest rates to slow the economy. This is a huge mistake. You know who's going to bear most of the pain of the Fed's policy? Not powerful corporations that are ratcheting up prices to pad their profit margins, not corporate executives, not Wall Street, not the wealthy, and not the upper middle class. Most of the pain will be borne by lower-wage workers and the poor. Researchers at the IMF estimate that the unemployment rate may need to reach 7.5%, double its current level, to end America's inflation crisis. This would be about 6 million job losses. And low-wage working people will take it on the chin because they are usually the first to be fired. Right now, the Fed is wrongly obsessing about a wage price spiral. Wage gains pushing up prices, when it should be worried about a profit price spiral. Corporate profits driving up prices. Wages are going nowhere when you adjust them for inflation. Take a look. As the Fed continues to slow the economy, workers are even less likely to get wage gains that approach inflation. You know what's really driving inflation? Not wages. Not government spending. Republicans are dead wrong when they claim the American Rescue Plan is a main driver of current inflation. Families are no longer receiving that money. Plus, it was necessary to help them stay afloat for part of the pandemic. The real driver is monopolistic corporations hiking prices to maximize profits. As a share of the economy, U.S. corporate profit margins in the second quarter of 2022 rose to their highest level since 1950. So there you have it, folks. Profits up, wages down. Yet the onus for controlling inflation is falling entirely on the Fed's blunt instrument of job-sapping and recession-driving higher interest rates. That's because interest rate hikes are the only tool in the Fed's toolkit. As the old saying goes, when you only have a hammer, everything looks like an interest rate. But this hammer does nothing to address a key piece of the inflation puzzle: corporations increasing their profit margins. And it will cause needless suffering for millions of people who are already struggling to keep the lights on. Instead of raising interest rates and slowing the economy toward a recession, Congress and the Biden administration should be taking aim at corporate price gouging. How? With a windfall profits tax, bolder antitrust enforcement, and temporary price controls. Know the truth and urge Congress and the Biden administration to put the burden of fighting inflation where it belongs, on price gouging corporations, not everyday working people.
That was a great video. I think this is spot on, and it's what I've been worrying about for a while. And to see that Jerome Powell is still dedicated to jacking up interest rates, man, this is a huge mistake. Huge mistake. You have to go after the corporate price gougers. There's no way around it. You have to do a windfall profits tax. You have to enforce our antitrust laws so that you can bring back actual competition in the economy. I mean, look, we've seen the Taylor Swift Ticketmaster fiasco is the perfect example of this. Look at what happens. Ticketmaster is effectively a monopoly, and look at what ended up happening. Everything costs a shitload of money, and it's horrible quality. They do a bad job. They have scalpers who are reselling at incredibly high rates. The website fucking crashes with a lot of traffic. This is what happens when you have a monopoly. So he's right. He's right. This is the solution, and unfortunately, nobody's talking about it. If you want to see me and Crystal Ball interview legends like Noam Chomsky, Cornel West, and more, subscribe to Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack. $5 a month gets you the video version a day early. Remember, we take 0 ad dollars for this podcast. Or you can sign up on Substack for free and get the audio version a day later. Link in the video description box below.